And this has actually happened. Wherever indigenous people have had their land taken away in quite brutal fashion, it happened in the ghost dance in the North Americas. They began a tradition that had never swept through before of a savior cult comes in, where we wait for the savior to come to us because we're disconnected, we're disempowered, we're disconnected from our bodies to begin with, and we're disconnected from the land which feed our bodies. But the way back in is through these ceremonies, it's through these magical ceremonies that build a meaning, because otherwise spirituality comes from a top-down place. It's often called guidance, literally guidance from above. But what about if it comes from bottom-up, organic place? That it's not about moral frameworks, although they may become part of it. It's about living in harmony with your environment. It's not about a set of structures or a set of belief systems that if you obey, then enlightenment, saving, going to heaven, whatever you want to describe it, that will be on offer. What about if it's a purely organic process and there's nothing saving us or redeeming us at the end because we don't need redemption? We are what we are. All we need to do is do ceremonies to get us back in relationship with the earth. But the other part of our soul that might be wounded and might be holding us back and which is intimately connected is our ancestral soul. And this, I feel, the center of the ancestral soul is in our hearts. Now, this ancestral soul, in my experience, carries a lot of wounding. There's been dispossession of lands. There's been... The last century, as many people have been exploring, was the bloodiest in human history. And there's always been wars, there's always been conflict to a certain extent. But the level that we become adept at it, which meant that a lot of... And it took in the whole world at the same time as well. Which meant... And the real tragedy is not just the death on such a mass scale, but the time of it meant that the dead couldn't be grieved properly. Now, grief is a separating agent. Grief separates us. Because when we fully grieve, and indigenous cultures understood this well, because when anyone died, they would have very complex rituals, ceremonies that often would go on for a year, to ensure that the person departed didn't get caught in this world and went fully on into the other world and joined the ancestral clan. In war, there's barely a chance for anything. So where does all that trauma go? Grief separates us. When we grieve fully, we lose control. We have to lose control. There's nothing you can do. If you fully give yourself over to grief, you lose control, and in that moment you surrender and you let go. And in that moment you accept life. You accept there are things beyond I accept there are things beyond my control. That the people I love, the dearest in my life, will at one point leave me, or I'll leave them. At one point I will leave my life, which is the most precious gift there is. I have to say goodbye a lot in life. We come in, and we're already saying goodbye to a lot. We're saying goodbye to the other world. And then gradually we just say goodbye more and more. When I fully release my grief, because my grief on the other side of it is, as Martine Prachtel talks about, is really praise of life. Because when I'm grieving it, I'm saying how much I miss it, and how much it was really worth to me. And when I'm praising something in life, I'm realizing that this situation, however beautiful, magical, will never stay the same. And so I'm grieving it, really. I'm letting it go at the same time. So when we lose our ability to do grieve fully, we lose our ability to praise fully. And that's why I believe that we've lost our connection with our ceremonies, because that's all we're really doing in our ceremonies, is we're praising life. We're praising it on its own terms. We're praising nature how it is. So this backlog of grief, so what happens if that grief doesn't happen? It creates ghosts. Simply. It's all that frozen emotion gets connected, sucked onto the present. And that can be like in a person, when I usually go into an energy body of a person in a healing, there's often many ghosts. It could be an old relationship that the person's never let go of, or a dream even, or a belief system. It creates a ghost. Or it can create a literal physical ghost, or not physical, but a person ghost. And that's what has happened because we've forgotten the ability to grieve fully and to fully honor. All shamanic cultures honor their ancestors. They honor them with feeding, with ceremonies constantly. They remember their ancestors. Now, why do they do that? Well, there's two reasons, I feel. One of them is because they offer a direct connection, the closest connection we have to the invisible world once they're in it. It's like if you have a relative that goes over and lives in Spain. The first thing you're going to go to when you go to Spain is look up your relative, aren't you? And even if they don't like you, they will put you up, probably, hopefully. Well, it's the same with our ancestors in the other world. They might not even like you, but at least they'll show you around. And that's why most people, when they come to die, will see their loved ones, their relatives. So it's a direct connection with the invisible world of spirit. The other is because my connection with my ancestor, which begins with my parents, if I follow that far back enough, then we all come to a common human ancestor. And then if I follow that further, we come to the animal ancestors and then the plant ancestors. And then we go back way back. We come to the elemental energies, which a lot of traditions have in the four directions: the fire, the water, the air, the earth. That their dance, their interaction gave birth to the universe. That is why a lot of shamanic ceremony will involve these four elements in perfect balance, recreating again the conditions that give birth to life. The sweat lodge is an amazing example of that, the American, North American Indian ceremony, whereby you have rocks heated in a fire, which becomes the seeds, and then they are brought into a dome structure covered in blankets, which is the womb. And you bring in the stones, and then you pour on the water, and it creates the breath of life. And in that place, when the door is down, you can't see anything. It's completely pitch black. You enter the void. You enter the beginning of time. You go back again to the beginning of time. So our ancestors are the first connection to that. Now, because there's been so much grief, and we've kind of lost our way of interacting in a very human way in the West. We've lost our ability to sit round in a kind of, and to really nurture and love ourselves firstly, to be honest. And that it's been reflected in family dynamics and relationships, and that's why psychologists have gone so far with this. How our family relationship dynamics may not have been the best. Usually because the people inflicting, there's been a lot of emotional abuse running down the generations. Because when people feel disempowered, when people have their lands taken away, when people don't feel fully safe in the world, i.e. connected with the mother, connected with that unconditional love, they will act up and it gets passed down the line. So because of this, there's a lot of splitting up of families. There's a lot of family feuds, incredible amounts. And once this has happened, and I see a lot of people for healings, and one of the most common themes is, I don't feel like I'm from, one of them is I don't feel like I'm from the family I was born into, huge theme. And the other theme is, I don't feel I'm from this world, another huge theme. I think they're both intimately related. Because often the people coming in for healings are the ones carrying all that ancestral burden. It has to go somewhere. All those ghosts. It's the law of nature. Nature will repeat patterns down the line. And so all that energy has to go down the line. And usually the people coming for healings are the one carrying all those ancestral ghosts. Because it's a negative energy and the ghost is full of pain and bitterness or whatever, or grief or rage or whatever, no one wants to be reminded of that. So the family will subtly reject that person. Like the scapegoat I was talking about at the beginning. The family will subtly, from a very young age, will reject them. because they don't want to be reminded of that pain. So these people grow up with this feeling, not only of being loaded up with all this ancestral trauma, but at the same time of being rejected by their own families. And this creates a disconnect. Usually, I believe the decision to hold a lot of this ancestral wounding and patterning is made before birth. The people usually hold in a lot of it, and I'm sure you wouldn't be here otherwise, that a lot of people in here are holding of their fair share. Usually they're the healers, if you like, and I mean that in a very broad term, the healer. I don't mean that you have to put your hands on anyone or anything. You can heal in many different ways. You can heal just by your presence, by your love, by your heart, by sharing your stories. So usually they're the healers. Having been, and this is what leads, I feel, to this feeling of not being in this planet, not being from this family, and not being, because this is the early experience. I've done many, many healings on people when you realize the trauma they're carrying is, say, 3 generations back. And the magic of shamanism is you can travel 3 generations back. There is no limit. And you can heal the person who actually needs healing. And you can help them along. And the tangible difference in someone when they've had these ancestral burdens lifted off is extraordinary. And the results is extraordinary. Because suddenly some people feel alive in the world. All that grief, all that stuff has been released. Because when we reject our family, beginning with our parents, we reject life. Because ultimately they were the ones that gave us the ultimate gift, which was life. So whatever is done and hasn't been done in the past, we have to release it, forgive it, let it go, bring that ancestral wounding to an end, because then we can bring all that power that's been blocked up from, and then we can bring forth what I like to call the ancestral gold. And this is incredible, because then I know where I truly come from. And then even though my traditions were broken apart on this land and they were destroyed, and we may know little bits about how people practice, but mostly it's been lost because they were all oral traditions. So we can put things together. But although that has happened, when the ancestral healing has been done, I'm connected to them. And I'm connected also to people who did practice these old ways and were in harmony with nature. And then through that, I can come to all that wisdom and that knowledge. And it also, again, connects me with the land, because our ancestors are buried in the land, wherever you come from. And the displacement of peoples, there's been so much displacement of peoples, that's reflected in the other world also. There's a lot of ancestors displaced, and they need a home there. And that's part of the role of the shaman. So because their stories are buried in the land. There's their triumphs, their failures, their blood, their sweat. That's the great wisdom. You don't need any book. It's incredible. All you have to do is go and sit by a tree or go and sit by a rock and sit, because it contains all this wisdom and ancestral knowledge. And I've got a couple of minutes. So the third part of our soul, which is one that is overemphasized often. So I think these 2 parts of our soul are the ones we have to bring healing to first. And then comes what I call the dreaming soul. And this is the part that can contain a lot of our belief systems about life. People have this, I see people a lot for healings, and they tend to seem to have this belief system that if I'm nice and kind, life will be nice and kind back to me. I don't know where the evidence for that lies. Because most people who are like that attract the opposite, attract people who are ruthless. And have the belief system, if I'm ruthless and I'm harsh, then I'll get what I want. These 2 do this merry dance constantly. And that is because I believe nature's concerned with what's real, not our belief systems. And that usually is a belief system imposed upon us, and it's an adapted behavior, and it's a deal we do with life. I will be good, life reward me. Well, life's not interested in that. Life's just interested in us being ourselves and who we are. And nature is interested in balance. And with this part of the soul, we have to go on that heroic quest to really, and people were talking about this in the forum earlier, to really find out who we are. Who am I? Beneath all that condition, who I was told I was supposed to be, who I believed I should be, who am I? And that's why a lot of shamanic initiation, like I say, is ordeal, because it means stripping down, stripping away all those illusions until you're cold, freezing, naked, and you go, I can't hold on to anything anymore. I've just got to let go. And then unbelievably, something happens. Spirit comes along and puts their hand behind your back, and you go, And then they say, why not look at it this way? And this is where we can really become who we truly are. And this is what I feel is needed in this world. Because in an age of conformity, in an age where people were told what to believe, in an age where people were giving away their power constantly to authorities, whether it's in books or governments or teachers or parents or projections of parents and teachers onto God and the cosmos, in an age like that, true rebellion is what is needed. And there is nothing more rebellious than finding out who you truly are. And that's where we can bring the trickster spirit in and wear it in a good way. And that's why shamans are difficult to control. And that's why they've been tried to be forcibly suppressed. Because you tell me your opinion, well, okay, that's your opinion. But my spirits are telling me something different. I have a direct contact, and that's all that matters. And also my soul and who I am is telling me. So that's what I feel is needed, is this true rebellion, to really, the act of rebellion, to come who you are. And then you realize, well, your life is just an offering back to the whole, and you go back to the body self. You go back to everything. You realize you don't have to convince anyone or tell anyone any stories. All you have to do, your life, the way you live it, you find in your medicine, you find in your magic, you find in your true self, becomes the greatest offering you can give to life. Because it's an offering of beauty that you're giving back into life. And life then becomes much more beautiful, harmonious, and a better place to be. Thank you.
Jez Hughes.
Well done, Mike.
Thank you.
Jez, thank you very much. Jez Hughes.
Thank you. Thank you.